In professional golf, there are players who follow the script, and then there is John Daly. For more than 3 decades, Daly has existed outside the sport's polished image, building a career on raw talent, brutal honesty, and a refusal to say what he's supposed to say. Fans don't look to Daly for rehearsed sound bites or diplomatic answers. They listen because when he speaks, it's usually uncomfortable, unfiltered, and impossible to ignore. And that's exactly why his latest comments have sent shockwaves through the game, because this time they landed differently. Recently, Daly delivered a series of blunt remarks aimed directly at the PGA Tour, criticizing how the organization treats the people who actually make the sport function. His words weren't buried in sarcasm or brushed off as humor. There was no wink, no grin, no attempt to soften the blow. Instead, Daly spoke plainly, calling out what he sees as long-standing issues that many inside golf quietly acknowledge, but rarely challenge in public. And when a figure like Daly chooses clarity over caution, people start paying attention. What makes this moment different is intent. This wasn't a reaction to a bad round, a controversial ruling, or a fleeting headline. Daly wasn't defending himself or promoting a cause. His comments were measured, deliberate, and rooted in frustration that's been building for years. That alone raises eyebrows, because Daly has never needed attention. Attention has always followed him anyway. So why now? That question is what turns a quote into a warning, because when one of golf's most independent voices speaks this clearly, it suggests something deeper is shifting beneath the surface. And if Daly is saying this out loud, others may already be thinking it quietly, which is where the real story begins. When you strip away the headlines and reaction, what John Daly actually said was far more calculated than many initially assumed. According to reporting from Golf Magic and Essentially Sports, Daly focused on one issue that rarely gets center stage in professional golf: the treatment of caddies. He questioned why the people carrying bags, managing yardages, and traveling week after week receive so little structural support from the very system they help sustain. It wasn't an emotional appeal, it was a practical critique of how modern golf distributes its resources, and that's where the discomfort begins. From there, Daly widened the lens. He pointed to financial inequality within the sport, highlighting how revenue continues to flow upward while many essential contributors operate with minimal security. His argument wasn't that elite players are overpaid, but that the ecosystem beneath them is underprotected. Compared to rival tours that now offer travel stipends, guaranteed support, and clearer safety nets, Daly suggested the PGA Tour has been slow to respond. In a rapidly changing golf landscape, standing still can be just as damaging as moving backward. Crucially, Daly framed this as a systemic failure, not a personal grievance. He spoke about conversations he's had over years with players, caddies, and insiders who share the same concerns but feel constrained by contracts or politics. That context matters, because it places his comments within a broader undercurrent of frustration that's been building quietly across the tour. Daly didn't introduce a new problem. He verbalized an old one, and that's what gives his words weight. Daly isn't chasing relevance, influence, or leverage. He's lived through multiple eras of professional golf and watched the business side harden over time. When someone with nothing to gain chooses honesty over diplomacy, it stops sounding like criticism and starts sounding like testimony. For the PGA Tour, the timing of John Daly's comments could hardly be worse. The organization is already navigating one of the most turbulent periods in its history, with the continued pressure from LIV Golf forcing long-standing assumptions about loyalty, money, and tradition into the open. Players who once would never have considered leaving are now weighing options, and fans are questioning whether the PGA still represents the future of the sport. In that environment, even a small crack can widen quickly. What complicates matters further is the growing fracture in player loyalty. Some remain fiercely protective of the PGA's legacy, while others feel the tour has been slow to protect their interests beyond the top tier. This has created a quiet but persistent divide, not loud enough to dominate headlines, but deep enough to undermine unity. Against that backdrop, perception has become just as important as performance, and right now the PGA is struggling to control the narrative. That's why John Daly matters so much in this moment. Daly isn't negotiating a contract, he isn't lobbying for a role, he isn't defending a decision or justifying a move. He has no leverage to gain and no approval to chase. That makes his words difficult difficult to dismiss because they aren't transactional, they're observational. When criticism comes from someone with skin in the game, it can be debated. When it comes from someone with nothing at stake, it lingers. This is what turns Daly's comments into something symbolic. He's a major champion, a survivor of multiple eras, and a figure who commands respect even from those who disagree with him. By saying publicly what many whisper privately, Daly didn't create a crisis. He illuminated one, and once that light is on, it's very hard to turn it off. The reaction to John Daly's comments wasn't driven by shock alone, it was driven by recognition. For many fans, Daly represents something increasingly rare in modern professional golf: authenticity. In a sport that has become carefully managed, sponsor-friendly, and relentlessly polished, Daly stands out because he never fully conformed to that image. His career has always felt human, messy, and real, and that's precisely why people still listen when he speaks. Daly's reputation for saying what others won't is not a marketing angle. It's a pattern. He has never been the spokesperson of an institution, and he's never tried to be. When he speaks, there's no press release behind it and no brand manager cleaning up the edges. That blunt honesty cuts through layers of corporate messaging, and fans instinctively recognize the difference between a statement designed to reassure and one meant to reflect reality. In moments like this, the contrast couldn't be clearer. On one side is the PGA Tour, offering carefully worded responses and controlled narratives about unity, tradition, and progress. On the other is Daly, speaking in plain terms about fairness, respect, and the people the system often overlooks. That imbalance feeds a growing perception that the tour is more focused on protecting its image than understanding its audience. And when fans sense that disconnect, trust erodes quietly but quickly. This is why Daly's voice carries cultural weight. He represents an older generation of golf, one that values character over branding and honesty over optics. As modern golf becomes increasingly political and corporate, Daly feels like a reminder of what the sport used to be and what some fans fear it's losing. And when nostalgia meets frustration, it creates a powerful response that institutions ignore at their own risk. It's important to understand that John Daly's comments are not the problem facing professional golf. They are a symptom of it. The frustration he voiced didn't appear overnight, and it didn't originate with him. Instead, it reflects a growing sense that parts of the sport have moved faster in appearance than in substance. When a system is healthy, criticism sounds isolated. When it isn't, criticism starts to echo. What Daly's remarks reveal most clearly is unrest beneath the surface. Not rebellion, not collapse, but discomfort, the kind that builds when voices feel unheard and concerns feel deferred. Alongside that unrest is a widening credibility gap between how the PGA Tour presents itself and how it's increasingly perceived. The tour speaks the language of progress and unity, but moments like this expose tension between messaging and experience. And once that gap becomes visible, it becomes difficult to ignore. This puts pressure on the PGA to respond, not with statements, but with substance. Reform doesn't always arrive through confrontation. Sometimes it arrives through moments of uncomfortable clarity. Daly didn't demand change. He highlighted imbalance. Whether the tour chooses to interpret that as criticism or as insight will shape its next chapter. Institutions rarely change because they're attacked. They change because they realize silence is no longer protection. The real question now isn't about Daly at all. It's about what comes next. Will the PGA listen and adapt before frustration hardens into division? Or will more players, current, former, and future, begin to speak with the same candor? Because when someone like Daly speaks this plainly, he's not asking to be heard. He's warning that others already are.